Yuna stood at the viewing window of their cabin, watching the stars drift past like distant fireflies. Behind her, she could hear the soft sounds of Jihu working with his plants. The gentle splash of water, the rustle of leaves, the quiet humming he always did when he thought no one was listening. She smiled despite herself. 2 years of marriage, and she still found these small moments precious. "The tomatoes are finally blooming," Jihu said, his voice carrying that note of pure joy he always had when talking about his garden. "I wasn't sure they would, with the artificial gravity being slightly off, but they adapted." Yuna turned to look at him. Her husband knelt beside the hydroponic boxes he had set up in their quarters, his hands carefully checking each plant. He was so small compared to her. She stood 7 feet tall, her blue-tinted skin tough enough to resist most blades, her muscles dense enough to bend steel bars. Jihu was barely 5'9", his skin a pale tan that looked fragile as paper, his build so slight that sometimes Yuna worried she might hurt him just by hugging too hard. The Stellar Harmony was a luxury transport vessel, one of the finest ships traveling the Andromeda trade routes. Most of the crew were Velcarians like Yuna, or Threxians with their rock-like skin and massive frames. Walking through the corridors, Yuna sometimes felt almost small, which was strange for her. But Jihu? He looked like a child among giants. "Come see," Jihu called to her, waving her over with a dirt-stained hand. Yuna crossed the cabin in 3 long strides and crouched beside him. He pointed to a tiny yellow flower on one of the tomato plants. His face lit up with happiness. She loved seeing him like this, so content with simple things. "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it, though she was looking at him more than the flower. Jihu leaned against her shoulder, and she wrapped one arm around him carefully, always careful, treating him like something precious and breakable. Because wasn't he? Humans were one of the fragile species, everyone knew that. They needed special environmental suits for most planets. Their immune systems couldn't handle half the bacteria in the galaxy. They bruised easily, broke bones from falls that wouldn't bother a Velcarian child, and tired quickly from physical work. When Yuna had first told her family she was dating a human, her mother had been horrified. "They live such short lives," her mother had said, "and they're so delicate. What if you accidentally hurt him? What if he gets sick? What if—" Yuna had stopped listening eventually. Yes, humans were fragile. Yes, Jihu needed her to open the tight jar lids and carry the heavy equipment. Yes, he got tired on long walks that barely made her breathe hard, but he made her laugh. He was kind and patient and brilliant in his own way. He could explain the complex life cycles of Earth plants for hours, making it sound like poetry. He never raised his voice in anger. He touched her like she was precious too, not just a big, strong thing. That evening they went to the crew dining hall. Captain Do-hyun was there, his massive Threxian frame taking up nearly 3 seats. Yuna's best friend Nari waved them over to a table where several other crew members were gathered. "Yuna, Jihu," Nari called. "We're having a strength competition after dinner. You should join." The invitation was clearly meant for Yuna. Nari barely glanced at Jihu as she said it. "I'll watch," Jihu said pleasantly, taking a seat. "I'm not really built for strength competitions." One of the Threxian engineers, a young male named Quan, laughed. "That's for sure. No offense, Jihu, but you look like you'd break if we looked at you too hard." Yuna felt her jaw tighten, but Jihu just smiled, unbothered. "None taken. I know my limitations." After dinner, Yuna participated in the competition, easily lifting weights that most species couldn't budge. She won, as she usually did, and returned to find Jihu reading on his datapad, completely absorbed in some article about Earth agriculture. Later, when they were alone again, Nari pulled Yuna aside in the corridor. "Can I ask you something?" Nari said, her voice low. "Are you really happy with him?" Yuna frowned. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that? Nari shifted uncomfortably. It's just, he's so fragile, Yuna. What kind of life can you have with someone you have to constantly protect? Someone who can't keep up with you physically? Don't you want a partner who's your equal? He is my equal, Yuna said firmly, just not in strength. But what else matters out here? Nari gestured at the ship around them, at the vast, dangerous universe beyond its walls. We live in a harsh galaxy, Yuna. You need someone who can survive it. Yuna didn't have a good answer for that. She loved Jihu, but sometimes late at night she did worry. What if something happened to the ship? What if they were in danger? She would protect him, of course, but the thought of him being so vulnerable scared her more than she wanted to admit. That night, as they prepared for sleep, Jihu caught her hand. "You're being quiet," he said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Yuna lied, but he saw right through it. "Nari said something to you, didn't she?" Jihu's expression was understanding, not hurt. "About me being weak?" "You're not weak," Yuna said quickly. "I'm physically weaker than you by a lot," Jihu said matter-of-factly. "That's just biology. But Yuna, that doesn't mean I need you to treat me like I'm made of glass." "I don't," Yuna started, but stopped. She did, didn't she? She was always so careful, always so protective. Jihu squeezed her hand. His grip was warm but gentle, the hand of someone who worked with delicate plants, not weapons or tools. "I know I'm different from what you're used to, but I'm tougher than I look. Humans always are." Yuna wanted to ask what he meant by that, but he was already settling into bed, pulling the covers up and closing his eyes. She lay beside him, her larger frame making the bed feel crowded, and listened to his breathing slow into sleep. She was still awake an hour later when she noticed something outside the viewport. A shadow, dark against the stars, moving too deliberately to be debris. It was there and then gone, so quickly she almost thought she'd imagined it. Yuna told herself it was nothing. Space was full of odd things. Asteroids, ice particles, old satellites. Nothing to worry about. She finally drifted off to sleep, one arm draped protectively over Jihu, unaware that everything in their carefully peaceful life was about to change. In the morning, the ship's alarms would scream, the Ravagers would come, and Yuna would discover that everything she thought she knew about her husband was wrong. The alarms tore through Yuna's sleep like claws. Red emergency lights flooded their cabin, flashing in painful rhythm. Jihu was already sitting up, instantly awake, in a way that seemed strange for someone who usually took forever to wake up for breakfast. "Get dressed now," Yuna commanded, rolling out of bed and grabbing her emergency kit from under the mattress. Her hands moved on automatic training, pulling out her duty uniform and equipment. The ship shuddered violently. Something had hit them, hard. Yuna heard the groan of stressed metal, felt the deck tilt slightly under her feet as the artificial gravity compensators struggled to adjust. Captain Do-hyun's voice boomed over the ship's speakers, rough with urgency. "All crew to battle stations. We are under attack by Ravager vessels. They have disabled our main engines. Prepare for boarding. Combat-capable crew, arm yourselves. Non-combatants to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill." Yuna's blood turned cold. Ravagers. The worst kind of pirates in the galaxy. They didn't just steal cargo. They killed for sport, took prisoners as slaves, and destroyed ships for fun. The Krell species made up most of their forces, 8-foot-tall insectoid warriors with natural armor and bladed limbs. They were nightmares made real. "Jihu, come on." Yuna grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. He was dressed already. She noticed distantly, in clothes she'd never seen him wear before. Dark, flexible material instead of his usual comfortable shirts. But there was no time to think about that. The corridors were chaos. Crew members ran in every direction, some toward weapons lockers, others herding passengers toward safety. Children of various species were crying. The ship shook again, and Yuna heard the distinctive sound of a hull breach somewhere in the distance, the hiss of emergency force fields activating to contain the damage. Nari appeared from a side corridor, fully armed and armored. She was carrying 2 pulse rifles. She tossed one to Yuna, who caught it easily. "Engineering and cargo bays are already breached," Nari reported, her voice tight. "At least 24 hostiles on board, probably more coming. Captain wants all security personnel defending the bridge and shelter zones." Yuna nodded, checking her weapons charge. "Full. Good." She looked at Jihu, who was watching everything with an odd calmness. Most of the other non-combatants looked terrified. Some were frozen in fear, but Jihu just seemed alert, focused. "The shelter is 3 corridors down," Yuna said, pointing. "Go now, fast as you can. Another explosion cut her off. This one was closer. Much closer. The deck bucked under their feet, and Yuna grabbed Jihu to keep him from falling. Screams echoed from somewhere ahead. "No time," Nari said. "We need to move together. The normal route to the shelter is blocked." They ran. Yuna kept one hand on Jihu's back, ready to shove him out of danger if needed. Nari took point, her rifle raised. They turned a corner and nearly ran into a group of frightened passengers, a mix of species huddled together. "Follow us," Nari shouted. "We're going to the shelter." The group moved as one, about 15 beings of various kinds. Yuna stayed at the rear, protecting them, her rifle scanning for threats. She could hear weapons fire now, distant, but getting closer. The distinctive shriek of Krell voices, screaming in their battle language. They reached the shelter entrance. It was a reinforced section near the ship's core, designed to withstand almost anything. The heavy doors were already open, and a Velkarian security officer named Borum was waving people inside. "Hurry, hurry!" Borum shouted. The passengers rushed in. Yuna counted them as they passed. 12, 13, 14. Where was Jihu? She spun around and saw him standing a few feet back, looking down the corridor they'd come from. "Jihu, get inside!" He turned to her, and for just a moment his expression was strange. Not afraid, not confused, almost calculating. Like he was assessing threats and options in a way she'd never seen from him before. Then it passed, and he hurried to her side. "Sorry, I thought I heard something," he said. Yuna pushed him toward the shelter entrance. Inside, it was crowded and dim. Emergency lights cast everything in a sickly green glow. The other passengers were mostly humans, Yuna noticed. 3 other humans besides Jihu. There was also a group of Philian traders, small bird-like beings, and some elderly members of various species. All the ones who couldn't fight. Jihu moved to join the other humans without her having to direct him. They stood together in a corner, speaking in low voices in their Earth language. Yuna's translator implant caught some of it, but they were talking too fast and quietly for her to follow. "I have to go back out there," Yuna said, kneeling in front of Jihu. Around them, the sounds of battle were getting louder. "You'll be safe here. The door is reinforced. Nothing can get through it." Jihu took her hands in his. His grip was steady, not shaking at all. "Yuna, listen to me carefully. If something goes wrong out there, if things get really bad, you need to know something." "What?" She was distracted, already thinking about where she needed to be, how she could help defend the ship. "Humans aren't what you think we are." "What?" Yuna looked at him, confused. "Jihu, there's no time." "Just remember that," he said. "We survived on Earth for a reason." Before she could respond, Boram shouted from the doorway, "Yuna, we need you now." Yuna stood, gave Jihu one last look, and ran for the door. It sealed behind her with a heavy thunk, the locks engaging. Safe. He was safe. Nari was at a corner junction, firing down a corridor. Yuna joined her, taking a position on the opposite side. Down the hallway, she could see them, Krell warriors, their chitinous armor gleaming in the emergency lights, their multiple arms wielding plasma weapons and blades. "There's at least 10 of them," Nari said between shots. "We dropped 2, but they keep coming." Yuna fired, her pulse rifle spitting blue energy bolts. One Krell staggered as the shot hit its thorax, but its natural armor absorbed most of the impact. These things were tanks, built for war. More security personnel arrived, setting up a defensive line. For a few minutes, they held. The Krell advanced slowly, carefully, using the corridor walls for cover. Professional soldiers, Yuna realized with a sinking feeling, not random pirates, trained warriors. Captain Do-Yun's voice crackled over Yuna's communicator. "All units, fall back to secondary positions. We can't hold the outer corridors. Defend the bridge and shelter zones only." They retreated in stages, covering each other. The Krell followed but didn't push too hard. They didn't need to. They were winning. Yuna found herself back near the shelter area with 5 other defenders. They'd managed to keep the Krell away from this section, but barely. 3 of their people were wounded. One Velkarian lay still against a wall, not breathing anymore. Then Nari's scanner started beeping urgently. She looked at it, and her face went pale. "No, no, no," Nari whispered. "What?" Yuna demanded. "There's a maintenance tunnel, runs parallel to the main corridor. The Krell found it. They're cutting through from the other side." Nari's hand shook as she pointed at her scanner. "They're going to breach directly into the shelter." Yuna felt like she'd been hit in the chest. The shelter, where all the defenseless passengers were, where Jihu was. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Nari checked her scanner again. 10 minutes, maybe less. They're cutting through the wall right now." Yuna didn't wait. She ran. Yuna sprinted down the corridor, her boots pounding on the metal deck. Behind her, she could hear Nari shouting for her to wait, to not go alone, but she didn't care. Jihu was in that shelter, defenseless, and the Krell were about to break through. She reached the maintenance tunnel entrance and saw exactly what she'd feared. Sparks showered from a section of wall as plasma cutters burned through the reinforced metal. She could see the Krell through the growing hole, their insectoid shapes moving with terrible purpose. 6 of them, at least, maybe more behind. Yuna opened her communicator to the shelter's internal channel. "Everyone get to the far wall. Get away from the maintenance tunnel side. They're coming through." Static, then Jihu's voice. Calm. Too calm. "Yuna, listen to me carefully. Don't come in here. Seal the corridor from your side." "What? No. I'm not trapping you in there with those things." "Yuna, please!" The wall exploded inward. Metal shrieked and tore. The Krell poured through the breach, their weapons raised. Yuna fired her rifle, putting 3 shots into the first one. It stumbled, but didn't fall. Its armor was too strong. The Krell returned fire. Yuna dove behind a support pillar as plasma bolts scorched the air where she'd been standing. She was alone, outnumbered, outgunned. This was how she was going to die, she realized. But at least she'd buy Jihu and the others a few more seconds. Then the shelter door opened from the inside. Jihu stepped out. "No!" Yuna screamed. "Get back!" But he didn't. He walked forward calmly, holding a metal rod in his hands. It looked like part of the shelter's internal structure, ripped free and wrapped with cloth at one end for grip. A useless weapon against armored warriors with plasma guns. The nearest Krell saw him and made a sound that might have been laughter. The creature was massive, towering over Jihu by nearly 2 feet, its bladed arms gleaming. It swung one of those arms at Jihu almost casually, a strike meant to cut the small human in half. What happened next made no sense. Jihu moved, not away from the blade, but toward it. He stepped inside the Krell's reach, his movement so fluid and precise it looked almost like dancing. The metal rod flashed in a blur. There was a sharp crack, and the Krell's arm bent at an impossible angle, its joint shattered. The warrior shrieked and tried to grab Jihu with its other arms, but he was already moving again. The rod struck twice more. So fast, Yuna could barely track it. The Krell's compound eyes burst. Its leg joint crumpled. In less than 15 seconds, the massive warrior collapsed, green blood pooling beneath it. The other Krell hesitated, confused. Then they attacked together, certain that overwhelming force would solve this problem. They were wrong. Jihu became something else, something Yuna had never seen or imagined. He flowed between the Krell like water, never in the same place twice. Every movement had purpose. He didn't try to match their strength because he didn't need to. He redirected their attacks, used their own weight and momentum against them, and struck with surgical precision at weak points Yuna hadn't even known existed. When one Krell tried to shoot him, Jihu somehow knew before the trigger was pulled. He moved, and the shot went wide. His hand snapped out and hit the weapon with the rod, breaking the Krell's grip. The gun clattered away. Another strike broke the warrior's mandibles. A second Krell charged, trying to use its mass to bowl Jihu over. He stepped aside at the last possible moment, and the warrior crashed into the wall. Before it could recover, Jihu struck the base of its skull and it went down hard. Yuna stood frozen, her rifle forgotten in her hands. She was watching her gentle husband, the man who spent his days tending tomato plants and reading about soil composition, systematically dismantle 6 Krell warriors like it was the easiest thing in the world. 3 minutes after it started, all 6 Krell were on the ground. Most were still alive but completely unable to fight. Broken joints, shattered weapons, damaged sensory organs. They'd been taken apart like machines. Jihu stood among them, that metal rod still in his hand. He was breathing a bit harder now, but not much. His clothes weren't even torn. When he turned to look at Yuna, his eyes were different, harder, older, carrying a weight of experience that didn't belong in the face of a peaceful botanist. "Sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "I was hoping you never would." Yuna tried to speak but couldn't find words. Nothing made sense anymore. The communicator crackled. Captain Do-hyun's voice, urgent. "All units report status. Krell forces are advancing on the bridge and engineering. We need reinforcements." Jihu looked at Yuna, then at the communicator on her belt. "How many more are on the ship?" he asked. His voice was still gentle, still Jihu. But there was a core of steel in it now that she'd never heard before. 40, maybe 60, Yuna stammered. "Across 4 breach points. We've lost half our security team." Jihu nodded, thinking with a speed and clarity that seemed impossible. "The other humans in the shelter. There are 3 more. Wake them." "What?" "Wake them. Tell them it's time." He looked back at the shelter door. "They'll understand." Yuna moved on automatic, going to the shelter entrance. Inside, the passengers were huddled against the far wall, staring in shock at the disabled Krell warriors. The 3 other humans stood together, and they didn't look surprised. They looked ready. One of them, a middle-aged man named Tae-yang, stepped forward. "The Krell?" he asked simply. "Jihu took them down," Yuna said, the words sounding insane even as she spoke them. "He says it's time, whatever that means." The humans exchanged glances. A young woman named Ji-woo nodded. An elderly man named Minho closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a resigned expression. They moved to a storage locker and pulled out materials. Metal rods like what Jihu had used. Pieces of equipment that could be weapons in the right hands. They moved with the same fluid efficiency that Jihu had shown, and Yuna realized with growing shock that they all knew how to fight like that. Jihu met them in the corridor. He spoke to them in Korean, rapid and low. Yuna's translator caught fragments, words like breach points and choke points and divided attention, military terms, tactical language. "You're all soldiers," Yuna said, not quite believing it even as she said it. "We're soldiers," Jihu corrected gently. Most of us retired. We came out here to be farmers, teachers, traders, normal lives. He looked at her with something like sadness. But we remember. Nari arrived with 2 other security officers, then stopped dead at the sight of the disabled Krell and the armed humans. "What in the void happened here?" Nari whispered. Jihu turned to address them all. "Listen carefully. The Krell are good fighters, but they rely on strength and intimidation. They've never faced opponents like us. We can help you take back your ship, but you need to trust us and follow our lead." "Humans," one of the security officers said doubtfully. "But we're human," Jihu interrupted. "And you're about to learn what that really means." He outlined a plan quickly. "Split into teams. Hit the Krell at their weak points in places where their numbers and strength wouldn't help them. Use the ship's layout against them. Make them afraid." "Afraid?" Nari said. "How do we make Krell afraid?" Jihu smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. "You show them they're prey, not predators. That's what humans are good at. We evolved hunting things bigger and stronger than us. It's what we do." They split up. Jihu led Yuna and Nari toward engineering. The other humans would work toward the bridge with the remaining security forces. Before they left, Yuna grabbed Jihu's arm. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Why hide this?" He met her eyes. "Because I didn't want to be this anymore. I wanted to be just Jihu, the man who loves plants and fell in love with you, not Jihu the soldier. Not Jihu the weapon." He touched her face gently. "I'm sorry, but right now, your ship needs the soldier. Later, I'll explain everything." They moved out into the corridors where the Krell waited. The corridors of the Stellar Harmony had become a war zone. Jihu moved through them like a shadow, and Yuna followed, trying to understand what she was seeing. Her husband glided along the walls, reading the environment like a book. He paused at corners, listening to sounds she couldn't distinguish from the general chaos. He watched the flicker of lights on metal surfaces, seeing things reflected there that told him where enemies were. 12 in engineering, he whispered. "Trying to sabotage the reactor. We can't let them finish." 12? Nari hissed. "There's only 5 of us. We need to wait for backup." Jihu shook his head. "No time. The reactor goes, we all die. But we can do this if you follow my lead exactly." He explained his plan in quick, efficient terms. It sounded impossible, insane. But Yuna found herself nodding, trusting him in a way she couldn't explain. He'd taken down 6 Krell alone. Maybe, just maybe, he knew what he was doing. They approached engineering from 2 directions. Jihu, Yuna, and a Threxian officer named Daewon took the main entrance. Nari and her partner Quan went through the maintenance access. The timing had to be perfect. Through the doorway, Yuna could see the Krell working on the reactor. They were placing explosive charges, their movements methodical and professional. These weren't random pirates. These were trained saboteurs. Jihu held up 3 fingers, 2, 1. He moved, not charging in like Yuna expected, but making a sound instead. A high-pitched whistle that echoed off the metal walls strangely. The Krell spun toward the entrance, weapons raised, and Jihu was already gone, rolling to the side into cover behind a support pillar. The Krell fired at where he'd been. Their shots gave away their positions. And in that moment, Nari and Quan came through the maintenance access behind them. The Krell tried to split their attention, but that was their mistake. Jihu had taught Yuna something in those few minutes of planning. Krell were used to being the ambush predators. They hunted, they weren't hunted. When forced to divide their focus, they made mistakes. Jihu moved again, drawing fire, making himself the obvious threat. The Krell focused on him because he was closest, most visible. They didn't see Yuna and Daewon flanking from the other side until it was too late. Yuna's rifle dropped 2 Krell with shots to their vulnerable joints. Daewon's heavy plasma cannon took out a 3rd. Jihu was among them now, that metal rod in his hands. The Krell tried to surround him, but the tight confines of engineering made their numbers a disadvantage. They got in each other's way. Jihu used that, constantly moving, positioning himself so the Krell blocked their own shots at him. Yuna watched him break a Krell's weapon hand, then use the creature's own body as a shield against its companion's fire. He moved with absolute certainty, no wasted motion, every action flowing into the next. It was like watching water find the cracks in stone, inevitable and unstoppable. 8 minutes later, engineering was secure. 12 Krell down. 0 casualties on their side. Yuna had 3 cracked ribs from where 1 Krell had hit her, but she'd survived worse. The other defenders just stared at Jihu in shock. "What are you?" Daewon asked, his rocky features twisted in confusion. "Human," Jihu said simply. He was breathing harder now, sweat on his forehead, but otherwise seemed fine. "Are the charges disarmed?" They were. Engineering was safe. But the battle for the ship wasn't over. Reports came over the communicators. The other humans, Taiyang, Jiwoo, and Minho, had been equally successful. They'd cleared the cargo bay and were working their way toward the bridge. The Krell were retreating in confusion, their careful plans falling apart. Captain Do-hyun's voice came through, shocked but relieved. "All units, the enemy is pulling back to their breaching points. Keep the pressure on. Don't let them regroup." Yuna and her group moved to support the bridge defense. They found the Krell there in disarray. These warriors who had seemed so unstoppable were now panicking. Some tried to fight, others tried to flee. Seeing their comrades taken down by creatures they'd dismissed as weak had shattered their confidence. Jihu and the other humans moved through them like ghosts, never staying in one place, always striking where they were weakest, always knowing exactly where to hit for maximum effect. It wasn't just fighting, Yuna realized. It was hunting. The humans had turned the Krell from predators into prey. On the bridge, Captain Do-hyun fought alongside his crew, his massive Threxian strength crushing Krell armor. But even he stopped to watch when Jihu disabled 3 Krell in under a minute. Moving between them so fast his form blurred. "Impossible," the captain muttered. "I've never seen anything like it." The tide had turned completely. The Krell, who were still functional, began abandoning their positions, fighting their way back to their breach points. Yuna's forces pursued them, and within the hour the last Ravager had either fled to their ships or been captured. The enemy vessels, seeing their boarding parties defeated, broke off and jumped away. They didn't even try to retrieve their people. They just ran. Silence fell over the stellar harmony. The kind of silence that comes after battle, when people are still processing that they're alive. Yuna stood in a corridor littered with disabled Krell, her rifle hanging loose in her hands, and tried to understand what had just happened. Jihu stood nearby, cleaning his improvised weapon with a piece of cloth. The other humans gathered around him and they spoke quietly in Korean. Yuna's translator caught some of it. 17 years since I last did this, Taeyang was saying. 15 for me, Jiwoo replied. I thought I'd forgotten how. You never forget, Minho said, his old voice tired. You just pretend you have. Nari approached Yuna slowly, like someone moving through a dream. Your husband just... What is he? I don't know anymore, Yuna admitted. I thought I knew. I thought he was gentle and peaceful and needed protection. But that man who just fought? I've never seen him before. Captain Do-hyun came down from the bridge, his armor scorched and dented. He walked straight to Jihu and the other humans. The corridor fell silent, everyone watching. You saved this ship, the captain said bluntly. My crew, my passengers, everything. We would have lost without you. He paused, studying Jihu with new eyes. I need to know, are all humans like you? Jihu looked uncomfortable. Most of us just want to live quiet lives, Captain. We're farmers, scientists, artists, teachers. We came to the stars to be those things. He gestured at the disabled Krell around them. This is what we used to be. What we had to be to survive on Earth. We're trying to leave it behind. Earth must be one hell of a world, the captain said softly. It is, Jihu agreed. Beautiful and terrible. It made us into survivors. But we're tired of surviving. We want to live. Yuna finally found her voice. You were a soldier. A real soldier. Not just Defense Force. Special Forces. Weren't you? Jihu met her eyes. He looked sad. Yes, for 15 years. I've done things I'm not proud of. Seen things I wish I could forget. When I finally retired and became a botanist, it felt like waking up from a nightmare. Meeting you was the first time I felt truly at peace. He took a step toward her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was afraid if you knew what I'd been, what I could do, you'd only see the soldier, not me. Yuna didn't know what to say to that. Part of her was angry at the deception. Part of her was in awe of what he'd just done. But most of her just wanted to understand. 3 days passed before the Stellar Harmony reached the nearest station for repairs. 3 days of cleaning up, treating the wounded, and dealing with the captured Krell. 7 security officers had died defending the ship. 23 more were injured, but it could have been so much worse. Everyone knew it. The atmosphere on the ship had changed completely. The human passengers, who people had barely noticed before, now drew stares wherever they went. Crew members stepped aside in corridors when they approached. Conversations stopped when they entered rooms. The change made Yuna's heart ache. She saw how uncomfortable it made Jihu, how he hunched his shoulders and tried to make himself smaller. She hadn't been able to talk to him alone since the battle. There had been too much to do, too many reports to file, too many wounded to help. But on the 3rd night after her shift finally ended, she found him in their cabin. He was tending his plants again. Half of them had died in the fighting when their cabin lost life support for a few hours. He was carefully removing the dead ones, salvaging what he could. His hands moved with the same gentle precision they always had, and Yuna felt a strange disconnect. These were the same hands that had taken down a dozen Krell warriors. Hey, she said quietly from the doorway. He looked up and tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hey, how are your ribs? Healing. Valkyrian bones are tough. She came into the room and sat on their bed, watching him work. We need to talk. I know. He set down the plant he was holding and turned to face her. You're angry. You have every right to be. Was she angry? Yuna tried to examine her feelings. I don't know what I am. Confused, mostly. I thought I knew you, Jihu. I thought I knew what humans were. Fragile. Gentle. Needing protection. And then I watched you move like some kind of predator and take apart trained warriors like it was nothing. You weren't even trying hard. Jihu flinched at that. I was trying. Just not in the way you mean. Everything I did out there, I was trying not to kill. Trying to disable instead of destroy. That's harder, actually. That stopped Yuna cold. You were holding back? Even then? Yuna. Earth is a nightmare world by galactic standards. Humans didn't have natural weapons or armor. We weren't the strongest or fastest. Do you know how we survived? He sat down beside her, his voice taking on that teaching tone he used when explaining his plants. We learned to be smarter, more adaptable. We learned to read our environment, predict behavior, exploit weaknesses. We became the best hunters on our planet not through strength but through patience and strategy. But the way you moved, the things you did, thousands of years of martial arts development, hundreds of different fighting systems, each designed to let smaller, weaker humans defeat larger, stronger opponents. We had to learn that because we spent most of our history fighting each other. His voice went quiet. We got very, very good at killing. Yuna thought about that. about Earth's history that she'd never really studied. She'd just seen human in the database and noted they were Category 3 fragile species. She'd never looked deeper. When humanity finally got into space and met other species, Jihu continued, we realized something. Everyone else thought we were weak, and we could have corrected that assumption. Could have shown our capabilities, but we chose not to. Why? Because we were tired of being warriors. Earth finally achieved peace about 50 years before we got into space. Real peace, for the first time in our entire history. And it was wonderful. His eyes were distant now, looking at something she couldn't see. We'd spent 10,000 years fighting. Wars over resources, territory, religion, ideology. We got so good at killing each other that we nearly destroyed ourselves several times. When we finally stopped, it felt like taking off armor we'd worn our whole lives. We could finally breathe. He looked at her directly now. So when we joined the galactic community and everyone assumed we were harmless, we let them. We took non-combat jobs, we lived quiet lives. We pretended to be weak because we were so tired of being strong. Yuna felt something shift in her understanding. But you keep training, all of you. I saw how the other humans moved. They haven't forgotten. No, we haven't forgotten. Every human child still learns self-defense and survival skills. It's cultural memory now, built too deep to erase. But most of us never want to use it. We'd rather tend gardens and write poetry and study science. He reached for her hand. I became a botanist because I wanted to make things grow instead of destroying them. That's the real me, Yuna. The soldier was what I had to be. The botanist is what I chose to be. Yuna held his hand, feeling its warmth. The same hand that had struck with deadly precision now held hers gently. But you're both, aren't you? The gentle gardener and the warrior. They're not separate. Yes, he admitted. I can't stop being capable of violence any more than I can stop being human. But I can choose not to use it unless I absolutely must. Like when the people I love are in danger. They sat in silence for a while. Outside their viewport, the stars drifted past. Finally, Yuna spoke. I treated you like you were fragile, like you needed constant protection. I was so worried about hurting you accidentally because I thought you were breakable. I know. And I let you, because I was afraid if you knew the truth, you'd see me differently, like everyone else on this ship is seeing us now. His voice was pained. Look at how they stare at us, Yuna. Like we're dangerous animals. Like we're threats. That's what I was trying to avoid. Yuna understood now. The other crew members were afraid of the humans. Respectful, yes, but also wary in a way they hadn't been before. The comfortable invisibility the humans had enjoyed was gone, replaced by a tense acknowledgement of their capabilities. Captain Do-hyun called a meeting earlier, Yuna said, with the human passengers. I wasn't there, but Nari told me about it. Jihu nodded. He wanted to thank us officially, and to ask us not to spread what happened too widely. Taeyang spoke for us. He told the captain we don't want the galaxy's view of humanity to change. Fear is exhausting. We'd rather be underestimated. Is that fair to you? Always hiding what you really are? It's not hiding, Jihu said. It's choosing which part of ourselves to show. The galaxy sees humans as peaceful scientists and farmers and artists. That's not a lie. That's who we want to be. The warriors we used to be are just sleeping, waiting in case they're needed. Most of the time, they're not. Yuna thought about this, about her own prejudices and assumptions. I'm sorry, she said finally. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was just being patronizing. You never needed my protection. That's not true, Jihu said, squeezing her hand. I do need you, just not in the way you thought. You make me feel safe in a different way. Safe enough to just be myself. To work with my plants and be gentle and not have to be the soldier anymore. That's what I need protecting from, Yuna. Not physical danger, but from becoming that person again. Something in Yuna's chest eased at his words. So we were both wrong about each other. Maybe. Or maybe we were both partly right. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. You're strong and protective, and I love that about you. I'm capable of defending myself, but I'm happier when I don't have to. Those things aren't contradictions, they're just us. The door chime rang. Nari's voice came through. Yuna, can I come in? Yes, Yuna called. Nari entered, looking uncomfortable. She glanced at Jihu, then at Yuna. I wanted to apologize. To both of you. I said some things about humans being weak, about Jihu not being a good match for you. I was completely wrong. Jihu stood and offered his hand. You weren't wrong that I'm not as physically strong as Yuna. That part is true. You just misunderstood what strength means. Nari shook his hand carefully, like she was afraid of him now. Jihu noticed, and his expression saddened slightly. I'm not going to hurt you, he said gently. I'm just Jihu. The same person who helped you replant your garden last month when the hydroponics failed. Remember? Nari relaxed slightly. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just hard to reconcile the person who talks about soil composition for hours with someone who can take down Krell warriors like that. That's why we don't usually show that side, Jihu said. It changes how people see us. We become threats instead of neighbors. After Nari left, Yuna and Jihu prepared for sleep. As they lay together in their bed, Yuna wrapped her arms around him. Carefully, always carefully, but for different reasons now. Not because he was fragile, but because she finally understood how much trust it took for him to be vulnerable with her. I love you, she said. Both parts of you, the gardener and the warrior, all of it. I love you too, he replied. Thank you for trying to understand. The Stellar Harmony reached the station the next morning. Repairs would take a week. As Yuna and Jihu disembarked to begin their new life on the colony, they walked hand in hand through corridors that had witnessed their truth. Word was already spreading through the pirate networks. The Ravagers who had escaped were talking. Avoid ships with human passengers. Those weak-looking beings aren't what they seem. The message spread quietly but surely. On their new colony world, Jihu planted his garden while Yuna set up her engineering workshop. Life returned to normal, or what passed for it. But both of them were changed. Yuna no longer saw humans as fragile things to protect, and Jihu no longer had to hide completely. One evening, watching the twin suns set over their garden, Yuna asked, Do you think the galaxy will ever really understand humans? Jihu considered this. Maybe. Someday. But until then, we'll keep growing gardens and building things and living peacefully. And if danger comes again, we'll handle it. That's what it means to be human. We're survivors who chose to be more than survivors. Yuna squeezed his hand. Such a small hand compared to hers, but strong in ways she was still learning to understand. Strong enough to choose peace in a violent universe. Strong enough to love across species. Strong enough to be gentle. And that, she thought, was the strongest thing of all.